Hello and welcome everybody on my channel. As you have seen this video or as you have clicked on the video, that means you are more likely interested into the American green card programs or American dreams. So, rightly, I mean, there is only one country in the world which has a program called American Dream, which has a name of a dream associated with the country name, and that's what the American Dream is all about. That irrespective of which origin or which background you come from, but everybody on the soil of United States of America, they have an equal opportunities for living and working and doing businesses in America. And as you might be knowing, that America has been made by immigrants, so that means that America is been welcoming for immigrants from all over the world. Now, when it comes to the immigration or migrations to the United States, there are a lot of myths, or you can say the mind built up in the market, that you need to have a huge amount of investments, or you need to spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to move and migrate to America. Yes, there are certain programs which are investment based categories, which are like E1 and E2 and EB5s, where you have to spend anything from 100,000 to $1 million or even more in certain scenarios. But not only that, America have different other programs which are based on your careers, your past performances, your achievements, which are based on your current endeavors and your successes and achievements which you have done in your careers. Those are called the talent based green card programs. So today in this video, we're going to talk about a couple of programs, a couple of talent based green card programs, which is naturally EB1-A. That is like if you are an individual with an extraordinary abilities, or EB2 national interest waiver, which is NIW. So particularly if you are a person who has done some achievements, whether it's in your science, in maths, in arts, in in technology, or even in businesses, or you are a person with a profile which is of a national importance to the country, to the United States, then you might qualify for an NIW programs. So, in order to understand the EB1-A and EB2-NIW program, I have invited a very expert and phenomenal immigration attorney, Mr. Joaquin, on my channel. He's going to join me today. He's an expert in EB1-A or all other the talent-based green card programs. So let's welcome Joaquin on the show. Hello, Joaquin.
Hey, Raheel, how
Well,
are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining the show.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Jackin, we are here today to discuss about the talent-based green card programs,
Sure.
which are EB1As primarily and EB2-NIWs. But before we jump into the program, do you mind just giving a quick overview about your background and how your expertise in these talent-based programs?
Sure. Well, I myself, I'm an immigrant, right? I came to the United States when I was around 13 years old. So I actually, lived the process. I know the anxiety that comes along with the process when you want to come to this country and you want to, obtain a legal status. So I can understand how people can be very nervous about the process. So, I think I have a particular personal sort of perspective that not too many people have. But the good thing is that, just like as you said, this is the land of opportunity here in the United States, and there's a lot of options, especially for people who, are talented, right? To do, what we call self petitions, top talent visas, where you don't need other individuals or other entities like companies in order to come here to the United States. You can do it on your own, right? So a lot
Right.
of people know that if you have a family member, if you're lucky enough to have a family member that's a resident, a citizen, they might be able to petition for you, right? Or you have perhaps a company that wants to sponsor you to come over here on an employment visa, then you might be lucky enough to come here to the United States. But that's not the reality for a lot of people. The good news is that there's a plethora of different visas here in the United States, some of which we're going to talk today. And they're called basically, we call them top talent visas, but they're essentially auto petition, right? You're
Yeah.
self petitioning yourself, and you tell them the United States government that you want people like yourself here in the States because you're going to contribute to this country with your talents, right?
Right.
And yeah, we can get it right into it. I don't know if you want to specifically go into one V.
No, naturally, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, let's jump into it, and we will start from understanding the what is like because you just mentioned the self petition programs.
Right.
So there are programs which are based on the sponsors, like you rightly said, the work permits and family based sponsors. So what are
Right.
these self petition programs, and how many categories are there? So let's just dive deeper
So
into
yeah,
this.
so we'll dive right into it. Hopefully, we won't bore anybody, in the show right now. But
Yeah.
essentially, there's category based, employment based categories in the United States visa system, right? So
Mhm.
they're named employment based, but two of them in particular, they're not linked to an employment, right? Even though they can. So the typical scenario is that you have a company, right, which has to basically ask permission to a different entity. A lot of people are just accustomed to hearing USCIS, immigration. But when you're dealing with a company who's petitioning a person who wants to come work here in the United States for that company, you got to deal with the Department of Labor, right?
Yeah.
Because the Department of Labor has to make sure that bringing someone else from um, outside of the United States is not going to be have a negative impact on the opportunities of Americans here in the United States in getting that job in particular. So
Mhm.
it's a process in which you have to demonstrate that you've attempted to get Americans to work for that position, and you're unable to do so, and then because of that, then now you're asking permission to petition for a foreigner to come and work for that company. So with this categories, you utilize them in order to fit in within what position that company wants to employ you in, right? So we have categories like EB1, EB2, and EB3. So depending on whether or not you need a certain level of education or you need a certain level of experience, right? You will be
Mhm.
fit within those categories, right? In order to have this company petition for you. But at the same time, within those same categories, EB1 and EB2 specifically, there are the self petitions, right? So for the EB1, you have what it's called, a visa for people who have extraordinary abilities. Okay. So
Mhm.
the EB1 is, as you can understand, top level, extraordinary abilities, right? There's three subsections of those of that visa that you can apply under, but we're going to discuss only the EB1-A today, right? But you can do it also for outstanding professors and researchers, or for like multi-managers across the world. If you want to sort of bring in a manager, an executive, right, from your company here to the United States, that's a separate subsection of the EB1 visa. But anyway,
Mhm.
within the EB1 criteria, you're essentially telling the government, hey, I'm a person who has extraordinary ability, and you should give me a residency because I'm only going to um, make this country better, right? And put my talents right in the society, which is only going to help out Americans, businesses in America, and potentially the government, right? So what we're looking into, or what the government is looking into, is certain criteria that you must meet, right? So the criterias are several of them. You have to meet at least three of them, right? But
Mhm.
they're aimed to make sure that the government understands that you are a person with extraordinary abilities, that you're above the average person within your industry, right? Some of
Mhm.
these criteria, for example, is if you received you know uh, some sort of a prize, right, or international or national recognized prizes or award, right, for
Mhm.
your particular endeavor, your particular field. A lot of people think, oh, I have to have a Nobel Peace Prize. No, it's not
Mhm.
particularly something
Right.
like that. So don't think that you have to have some extremely highly recognizable prize, but obviously that does help out. It could be at a national level, and if you have good attorneys, you can make pretty good arguments even at local levels, right, state levels, right, that you've gotten prizes, or even within big companies, right, that you've been awarded because you're so good at what you do, and you can
Mhm.
make that argument you received an award and thus you meet this criteria. A second criteria they look into is whether or not you're a member of a distinguished association, right? So I always like to throw out this example. I'm an attorney here in the United States, right? As you can see back there, I have my diploma, right?
Yeah.
And I also have from the law school that I went to. And here you in the United States, you have to pass right a licensing test in order to become an
Right.
attorney, right? So in order to do so, I pass the test, I become an attorney. There's also an association here called AILA. AILA is basically the Association American Immigration Lawyers Association. So
Right.
it's an association for lawyers that practice immigration. If I were to be applying for, say, an EB1 um, visa, this particularly wouldn't really fit into that criteria. Why? Because the only thing that I have to do is just be an attorney,
Right.
practice immigration, and pay for it. What they're looking for is a little bit more. They want to know that this organization, you have to have a process in place where they either ask you to join it, you apply for it. There's maybe a panel that looks at your profile and says, hey, you know what, Raheel, you actually meet, sort of the criteria internal criteria that we're looking for. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're making a certain amount of money, if you're, you've been in media outlets, etc. So they might have their own internal process, but there's got to be a process, right, that can be sort of described to the authorities to make them convinced that it's not just any sort of membership that you can just simply pay for and join, right? So that's another criteria that they look into. Another one is whether or not you've been asked to judge the work of others, right? Whether it be in a panel or by yourself. So that's
Mhm.
indicative of you having dominance in your field. If you're being asked, for example, maybe at a renowned university, right? Or perhaps there's a government sponsored or maybe company sponsored project, right, that is going to be a sort of a competition, and you need to have judges in order to assess which presenter has been giving the best presentation pertaining to that particular project, right? And if they
Mhm.
ask you to be one of the judges to make that decision and that determination as to who should win this project or be given this project, right? Then that shows that you obviously know what you're talking about. You obviously have a clear understanding, right, and have a really good reputation within your field, and your reputation and your cognizance of your field is very well welcomed, and they're trying to use that in order to see which person will be able to get assigned this project, right? So that's another way that you can fulfill that criteria. The other one is whether or not you have had contributions, right, to your field, right? That could be usually presented in forms of letters of support of recommendation. So essentially, if you're in your particular field and you've done something that has basically either transformed the field or has had an impact in the field, or other companies within your field are utilizing, right, but you were sort of one of the sort of pioneers of that particular contributions, right, or methods that you've implemented, right, whether it be in marketing, whether it be entrepreneurial side, it could be scientific. I mean, it could be in all sorts of different fields, right? But if you
Mhm.
can sort of demonstrate that you've made some sort of like an impact in your industry, that's a criteria they look into, right?
Mhm.
The other one is related to basically publications, right? If you've been an author, right, it could be a scholarly
Mhm.
authorship, or you can just be basically an author of articles within your industry, right? It could be, like I said, it could be in the entrepreneurial world, it could be in the science world, it could be in the IT world, technology world. But essentially, if you are an author, and especially the articles that you are putting forth and your writing are being shared a lot, then that demonstrates that you're a person that knows what they're talking about, right, and
Mhm.
that dominates their field. And that's why that you should be granted this criteria if you're being examined for this particular visa. On the other side of the coin, they're looking for publications about you, right, or the work that you've done, right? So there might be some media outlets, right, that have mentioned or highlighted the work that you have done in your industry, how beneficial it was. So maybe give some metrics out in terms of they were able to achieve x amount of revenue in a short period of time, or in this quarter, whatever it may be, that sort of highlights that you're really good at what you do in your field. You want to separate yourself from the crowd, right? you're
Yeah.
you're you're, you're telling the government that you're extraordinary. Another one is it's basically whether or not you have played a critical role, right, in distinguish either company or entity. It could be a government entity, it could be a private entity, and if you played a critical role where you were sort of in an executive role and you've drove that company or that entity into certain new standards, right, where you were creating more revenue or you were saving, right, expenses, unlike previous executives, then you can show that you've played a very distinguished, right, and critical role in that particular company or entity, governmental entity it could be as well, or organization, even an NGO, right?
Mhm.
If you've done something that has really helped that entity, move forward with whatever their focus is, then essentially you can probably meet this criteria. Now, keep in mind, Rahil, you only need three, right? But you want to obviously have as many as you like and as you can meet in order to be qualified for this visa. This visa, although it says visa, I know it's very it gets a little confusing. You're actually getting a residency. You're getting a green card. So
Right.
this is a green card that you're getting, right? And you need to meet, the regulations say that you need to meet only three, but obviously the more that you have the better, and attorneys are always looking to make arguments even in potential criteria they might be a little weak. The role of attorneys, right, and the companies that help you sort of fortify those criterias,
Yeah.
such as visa franchise, right, they can help you get publications, right, or maybe be part of distinguished organizations, right, that's only going to help you have a more convincing argument once that visa is presented to the authorities.
Mhm.
So I know I threw a lot of
That's
information
a
right
that's a
there.
very brief and very detailed.
Right.
I mean, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive information. So basically, if I sum it up in all, so EB1-A category is for the individuals with the extraordinary skills who have done something and make some achievements in their careers, whatever they have been currently doing, whether it's been in shape of an awards, accreditation, some nominations. They have been judging the work of others. They have been financially, they have been in an earning capacity which is on the top
Correct.
tier of their industry,
Yep.
or they have some other accreditations from the industry experts, or you are on the top niche of your industry. So that is just a brief overview of which sets you apart from the crowd and makes you qualifying for EB1-A program.
Absolutely.
So
And hey, thank you, Rahil. You're a good learner. And
yeah,
I completely forgot to mention remuneration. That's a pretty big one, right?
yeah.
So if you're able to demonstrate that you're getting paid in comparison, this is a something a very important thing
Hmm.
to take into consideration. A lot of people misinterpret what the regulations state relating to remuneration, which
Okay.
essentially means you're getting paid good money for the work that you do, and that you should be getting paid because you're good at it. It's not a comparison to what a person would make here in the United States. It's a
Right.
comparison to what a person in your industry in your country would make, right?
Wow.
So
Okay.
if in your country, say an engineer, right, makes X amount of dollars, right,
Hmm.
but you are making 30% more, 25% more,
Hmm.
40% more, 50, 100% more, right, than that engineer in your country, then you're probably going to be able to meet this criteria of remuneration, which demonstrates that you are a person of extraordinary ability, and because you're a person of extraordinary ability, you're getting paid like
Right.
that other person,
So
right?
basically, it's not an amount of dollars which matters primarily. It's in your industry, because even, for example, a payout or a compensation for a doctor would be different as compared to, let's say, a business consultant like us. That will be a different. So in
Exactly.
your industry, whatever you are getting, you should be on the top of the industry experts.
Exactly. So the
Perfect.
comparison is to your industry and also in your country.
Got it. Okay. So now when we compare this EB1A, I understand, and I hopefully, my audience would also understand that this is a green card based on your extraordinary abilities. So there is another program which we see a lot, which we hear about a lot nowadays, which is NIW. So
Yes.
what is that in a short view? If you can just give us that descriptions, and how NIW is different than EB1A.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because there's a lot of buzz around
Mhm.
the EB2-NIW, and the NIW part is it's the national interest waiver, right? And the waiver
Mhm.
part is essentially what I was explaining at the beginning of the presentation, right?
Yeah.
It's they're waiving the labor certification. And the labor certification is a process in which, as I explained before, the company here in the United States is asking the Department of Labor to give them a certification saying, hey, we know that you as a company, you attempted to get Americans to work for your company, but
Mhm.
you weren't able to get any Americans. So now you're able to bring in a foreigner to fulfill these jobs in the United States. So what the EB2-NIW does is that it waives that requirement, which means
Mhm.
that you don't have to go through that process and you can do a self-petition, right? So the EB2-NIW, the other very important part, aside from the criteria, which is very similar criteria to what we already talked about in the EB1,
Mhm.
but we can go over it. You can have an academic record showing that you have a degree, right, a master's degree or an advanced degree, right? That sort of gets you your foot into the door in order to apply. There's a lot of misconception out there that makes people believe that just because you have a master's degree, you're automatically approved, and that is not the
Exactly.
case. It's not the case. It can get you, maybe it gives you the privilege, right, to
Right.
apply, but it doesn't mean that you'll be able to be approved for it, right? But that's one way to just get your foot on the door. Let's just
Mhm.
say, right. The other way is essentially proving whether or not you are a person who has exceptional abilities. Remember, we discussed previously
Right.
extraordinary abilities, exceptional abilities. There's a lower standard to it, right? And
Mhm.
they look at criteria, right? They look at criteria like the one that we discussed previously in the
Mhm.
one to see whether or not you're exceptional. And typically it has to do also with critical roles and organizations, remuneration, just like we just talked about.
Mhm.
One different one that they particularly have is whether or not you have a license to practice your profession or certification
Mhm.
for your profession in specific, right? Memberships in distinguished associations, right? Recognitions and prizes. So they're pretty much very similar to the EB1, but there's a very very unique distinction here, right? And this is
Okay.
very important, right? Is the national importance part, right? So
Mhm.
it's interesting because as logically you could see, EB1 is higher than EB2, right?
Right.
So you would think automatically by its nature, it's always going to be harder to get an EB1 than an EB2. But that's not always the case, Raheel. And the reason
Mhm.
why that's not always the case is because the EB1 requires a person to be extraordinary, but there's no requirement for for the person to show that there's going to be a national importance in the work that you're going to bring in, the talent that
Right.
you're going to bring in, right? The
Right.
expertise that you're going to bring in is going to be, there's not a requirement that it has to be in the national importance, right? It's going to be
Mhm.
important for this country. So that's
Right.
the distinction, right? And I like to say that, there might be some, professions that you might be very extraordinary in, but the United States government
They
doesn't
don't
feel
need it.
that they need it in terms of their national interest, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at things that can stimulate the economy, for example, or perhaps can help in fields such as you know they want to reduce exports of foods, right? That they can
Mhm.
maybe produce here with your talents, right?
Mhm.
um, we had a client that did vertical farming, right? So
Yeah.
when you do vertical farming, you don't have to utilize so much land. You don't have to waste so much water. So that's actually in the national interest of the United States to have people that know how to basically design, projects that can yield things like vegetables here in the United States, right? So that's something of maybe an example. We've also have a clientele. They're very good at very niche things like metals, right? Or metals
Mhm.
that are utilized for aviation, right? So that could be in the national interest of the United States, not only on the defense perspective, but also for traveling. Traveling is
Right.
a huge aspect of the United States. So it's really important that people understand that it's not only that you have an advanced degree, right? But it's also that whatever it is that you are proposing to do in here, and
Mhm.
we'll get into that sort of third angle, right? your proposed endeavor is going to be of the national importance, right? It's going
Mhm.
to be important to the country, and the United States is going to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we would like to have a person like you here because
Right.
it's in our interest, right? It's in the national interest to have a person like you in here.
Okay.
The, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
No, no, go on. Go on.
No, I was going to go on the third, basically,
Yeah.
aspect of the EB2 and IW that a lot of people don't seem to know too much about, is that the
Mhm.
regulations are very specific about um, what the proposed endeavor is that you're going to propose to USCIS. What
Mhm.
that essentially means is, okay, we might agree with you that what you do is very important, and it's in the interest of the United States. We might
Mhm.
agree with you that you are a very qualified person, right? And you meet the criteria necessary in order to get this visa. But then tell me, how are you going to do it here in the United States? Do you have a
Right.
plan? What exactly are you going to do? Are you going to work for a specific company? Are you going to work for a specific government entity? Are you going to create your own company where you're going to be basically utilizing your expertise to help other companies, other government entities? So you have to have either a professional plan or a business plan, right, that lays out exactly how you're going to help, the country, right? And that's what it's called, a proposed endeavor. What is your
Okay.
endeavor? What are you proposing you're going to be doing? We know you're really good at what you do, right? We know that what you do is of the interest of the United States, but tell me how you're going to do it. So that's the third aspect is
Right.
really
So unlike the EB1A, EB1A is just based on your past performances and your
correct.
achievements. So here you have to not only prove that you have some skills or some expertise which is of a national interest, but also you have to propose that how you're gonna utilize those expertise for the national interest of the country. So,
Exactly.
so it's past
Exactly.
plus future together.
Exactly. It's past
Okay.
plus future. Exactly. That's you couldn't have had said it better, Rahil.
Yeah.
Essentially, EB1, it's what have you done before,
Right.
right?
Right.
What you did before, okay, that's great. Then that works
Take it.
out for you. In
Yeah.
here is what have you done for EB2 and IW? What have you done before? What are you going to do in the future?
What you gonna
That's
do
a
for us
really,
in the
really good
future?
way to put it.
Great.
Exactly.
Okay, so when it comes to the national interest, so I understand there is a requirement for the education, but how important is the education if the person, the applicant, is having some kind of an endures or some kind of industry? He do not have a particular education, but he is doing something which is of a national interest. So for example, let's say during the COVID, we all have seen here the healthcare, the shortage of the healthcare professionals. So do you think if somebody is having a great healthcare expertise as a business owner or as an expert or whatever you call it, and he's going to do the same kind of endeavors here and he's on top of his industry, okay, will he still qualified even if he doesn't have that particular
Yes. Yeah.
education? And same we
Absolutely.
have seen it in the when the chip shortage came after the COVID. So there can be a good factory owner who can manufacture those kind of chips and the mobile sims, but he's not an educated guy. So any of these
Right.
kind of things, or even the farmer example which you said. So
Yeah.
what do you think
Sure.
about those?
So look, I'm glad that you brought this up. So you have to think about the EB2 and IW as two ways
Hmm.
to be qualified, right?
Hmm.
And the first way people misunderstand it because they think, oh, I have an advanced degree or I have, a university degree plus 5 years, right?
Hmm.
Within my field, which is equivalent to an advanced degree,
Yeah.
according to USCIS. So then on that end, it gets your foot in the door, like I said, but you still have to, sort of prove why it is that you're going to be of national interest, right?
Right.
And how you're going to do it, right? And you prove that through the criteria that you've done, that you can prove, and based on your previous experiences and what you've done in the past in your profession, right? But that's one separate angle. The other one is the exceptional ability that has
Hmm.
no educational attachment to it. That's
Okay.
just essentially you utilizing the criteria that we just went over, right? And
Hmm.
saying, hey, I meet this criteria. I might
Hmm.
not have the education, but I meet
Yeah.
the criteria and I'm exceptional to it. And not only am I exceptional to the criteria, but I'm also of the national interest, right? What I do
Mhm.
is of great importance to the country, and then I
Mhm.
should get a residency, just like you said. I mean, a chip shortage, or maybe supply
Or
change.
some AI developers nowadays. There are a lot of like
Developers,
a lot of young kids and this Gen Z who are not having a good education or a degree, but they
right?
have some skill. They are working on AI and they are developing some project which is probably of actually a national interest. So they might should be qualifying for it, right?
Absolutely. And think about it, just like we discussed. I mean, the EB1, in theory, is a harder visa, right?
Yeah.
But there's no education
Right.
requirement. We just went through all the criteria, and we
Right.
we never discussed anything about
We didn't discuss
education,
about the education, right?
anything about education. So look at it that in that way. So look at it in
Got it.
in the perspective that for EB2 and IW, although education might be one way to get your foot in the door to try to
Right.
apply, you still need to prove the criteria, right? But you don't need to have the education. You can
Right.
also stand on your own based on your past, endeavors and your profession and meeting the criteria that's outlined by USCIS.
Right. So, as you also have rightly mentioned, only having a degree or an education does not immediately qualifies you for a for this talent based green card, or not having an education but having all the other criteria fulfilled does not qualify also. So which
Exactly.
means so education is can play a very integral role, but it's not something which is the only thing which is a deciding factor of this program. Because lately I have because my audience is basically from Pakistan, right? So I have seen and heard a lot of different rumors and the noises coming from the market that okay, as long as you have a graduation or a master's degree plus 5 years experience, you are working in a let's say some small factory in a town, 5 years you worked in as an accountant, you are qualified for a national interest. And I am tired of explaining to these people that okay, good for you that you are making a good living out of your whatever the endeavors you are doing. But working as an accountant or a receptionist or as a traditional employee out of a company does not make you qualify for a national interest of United States of America. So you need
No.
to do something, you need to go a little more, you need to be ahead of your competition, ahead of in the top of your industry, if you want to really go for that talent based program.
Yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely, you're absolutely right, Raheel. Unfortunately, there's people that they're peddling, this idea, because when you look, you can, anybody can go on Google and you just put in,
Right.
EB2-NIW USCIS criteria, right? And
Right.
then it's going to take you to the official website of the United States government entity that adjudicates these petitions, and then you're
Yeah.
going to see advanced degree, and then you're going to see exceptional ability. So they read and they say, "Oh, advanced degree." Well, I have an advanced degree. They
Right.
literally read it there, but they don't have an understanding what the regulations is actually saying. It's saying
Exactly.
yes, you can qualify through an advanced degree, but you still have to
You
show
still have
us
to follow and qualify for the
how
rest of it.
how you are of importance, right,
Yeah.
to the country, and
Perfect.
how you've met some criteria that shows that you're of importance to this country, right?
Right. Right.
You're of the interest of this country.
Great. So, okay. So now we understand the eligibilities and the requirements of the both programs. So if we need to, we understand the differences too. So now if we need to choose and pick based on my, let's say if I am the potential applicant, I'm still confused that I should be of a national interest waiver or I should be considering myself as an extraordinary ability. So what can be the differentiative factors for somebody who want to decide and choose that which one program is more suitable for him? Do you get it?
Well,
Am I,
I think
am I
it,
making sense?
yeah. You're making perfect sense. I think it really has to. You have to seek out, the help of professionals that
Professionals,
know
okay.
what they're talking about, and they can sort of place your talents within the category that works best.
Hmm.
We've had people that will qualify for an EB1, but
Hmm.
they won't qualify for an EB2 and IW, right? And
Got
vice
it.
versa, right? So it's important that that the distinction. The good thing, and what I always talk about every single time, I have interviews about these two visas is that, you know, don't think that just because you don't have the criteria right now doesn't mean that you won't be able to apply in the future. The great
Got it.
thing about these things, and I invite everybody to, you know, go to your website, go to other websites, government websites, visa franchise website as well, to look at the requirements that you can build on these criteria. So
Right.
perhaps right now you're sitting here and you're saying, look, I got good pay, all right, and I've got an award here, or maybe I'm a member of an association, right?
Right.
But maybe I don't have too much PR about me. I don't have too many
Right.
articles written about me. Some people don't like that, but they're really good at what they do, but they
Yeah.
just don't simply seek that type of sort of attention, let's say, right? But
Mhm.
that's something that could be solved, right? You can work with professionals that can certainly help you out, right, and guide you in order to strengthen certain criteria, and then that way you will be very well positioned to apply for one of these two visas. But in the end, to answer your question, I think the best way to determine which visa is better for you is to speak with a person who is knowledgeable and in
Right.
these visas, to try to place you in the correct one, and the one that you have a higher probability, higher chance of approval.
Absolutely, because I mean, since this is a life-changing event, and probably, in any individual's life, this can be one of the biggest event, somebody can, or biggest project somebody can ever work on. So it's always better that you take the professional help and professional guidelines, and get your evaluations done. And same like, we they can talk to Visa Franchise, they can do consultations with Patrick, our common friend, and and this is called a profile building. So even if
Right.
you, as you rightly mentioned, that you are not qualified maybe today, or you are not meeting all of the requirements and the criterias, but you have some on your plate, so why don't you go to a professional expert and get your profile building and profile development, so that in future you can work towards those programs.
Exactly, exactly. It's a matter of working on yourself, right? And who
Right.
doesn't want to do that, right? You're going to be working on yourself. You're just doing it with people who know what they're doing, right? And they can guide you towards a process that has a higher likelihood of being a process that are going to yield positive results in a potential application in the future.
Got you. Okay, so now on the moving ahead, I will just I know we are I've taken a lot of your time,
No,
but
no,
if you
no. By
still,
all means, no worries.
okay, perfect, thank you, I appreciate it. So
Okay.
now we would say, okay, in terms of the procedures, how do
Mhm.
you think the process works? How long does this whole program takes? And
Okay.
the what we somebody should consider when we are planning to start these kind of programs.
Sure, sure. Very great question. We get it all the time. So, in the United States immigration system, there's sort of two worlds, right?
Hmm.
One where you can process applications inside of the United States,
Hmm.
and the second one where you know submit the petition in most visas uh, in the United States, but the process is finished in the consulate, U.S. consulate in your particular country, right? So
Hmm.
that can have some different time frames, right? And it also depends on the visa bulletin. If we're going to focus on these two visas, EB1 and EB2-NIW, there's
Yeah.
something called the visa bulletin, right? So, and
Right.
I invite anybody who's watching to just go on Google, right, or your search engine, whichever it may be, right,
Mhm.
and then just put the visa bulletin, and you put basically the month that we're in and the year that we're in, and then
Mhm.
you're going to go to a web page that is the State Department web page, and then in that page they're giving an estimate, right, of the waiting time, right? And these waiting times, right, they fluctuate, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes there's a lot of people applying and they're not sort of adjudicating up the petitions long enough. Right now, for example, so for pretty much um, everybody around the world, besides nationals of China and India, for the EB1, the visa is current. What does that mean? That means that if you apply for EB1 right now and you get approved, there's a visa available for you, which means
Right.
that you can go to the consulate, get an interview, get your visa stamped, and you can come in as a resident,
Permanent
within
resident.
within a relatively, short period of time.
Hmm.
On the EB2 right now, there's something called a retrogression. So
Yeah.
retrogression essentially means that, they're backed up, right?
Hmm.
They haven't been able to process these visas. So right now, pretty much for everybody except, China and India and also Mexico, they're looking at petitions from that were submitted in March 15th, 2023. So you're looking at about,
And a
16
year,
months or
more
so,
than one and a half year
more
now.
than a year, yeah, more than a year and a half. So,
Hmm.
there's a process called premium processing, right? That where you can pay the government extra amount of money, and uh, they'll give you an answer to your petition within 15 days or 45 days, depending on the visa, right? So, maybe for the EB1 that would make sense because you want to get, an answer quickly, right? You don't want to waste, you don't want to wait 5, 6 months to get an answer. That makes
Right.
sense because the visa is current, because you
Right.
can get a visa immediately. But for the EB2, perhaps it's not a good idea because even if you get approved, guess
Right.
what? As of now, you got to wait about a year and a half. But this changes every month. That's why I
Right.
tell you you have to go every month, because maybe in a month from now they say, oh, instead of March 2023, now we're up to December of 2023, right?
Right.
Which means that your waiting period is a lot shorter. In terms of the process itself, for both these visas, like I said, the petition itself is called the I-140 petition, right?
Hmm.
Because it's, once again, an employment-based petition, but you're doing it on your own. And
Okay.
the I-140 petition is submitted here in the United States to the government entity that adjudicates these visas, which is USCIS, right? And then they're the ones that make a determination. Like I said, there's two worlds in immigration. Assuming that the visa is current, the visa
Hmm.
category is current, and there's visas available, and that you're inside of the United States, right, with a valid visa that allows you to be in here, right, then you can do what it's called an adjustment of status,
Hmm.
which is basically you're adjusting from, say, you're here on a student visa, right?
Right.
And then you're going to adjust from a student visa to that of a resident, right? So then you're adjusting your status. So that's the second part of the process. The beauty of it is that if the visa category is current, right, and you apply for the I-140, right,
Hmm.
you could do the adjustment of status and the visa application at the same time. And when you do that and you submit the adjustment of status application, you have the opportunity to apply also for a work permit, right,
Hmm.
and also for a travel document, which means that while the application is ongoing, let's say you don't want to pay for premium processing, you just want to, let it go as it is. You're already here in the States. You're in no rush to leave, right? You say, I'm fine waiting 6, 7, 8 months. It's fine. So when you apply and you do the adjustment of status, as well as the I-140 petition, you can apply for a work authorization and a travel document. And those tend to come in way quicker than the actual decision, anywhere between a month to maybe 3 months, right? And that gives you the ability to work here in the United States legally, right? While
Hmm.
you're waiting for your petition to be answered, right? And at the same
Yeah.
time, you have a travel document,
Hmm.
or if you want to go see your family, there's no problem. The process is ongoing. It doesn't mean that just because you leave your process behind. No, it's literally a travel document that allows you to come back in. You go over there, maybe for the holidays, you want to go visit your family, your friends. You go, you leave for a little bit, and then you come back, and you're right back where you were before, just waiting for you to get an answer. So that's one route. The other route is just doing it through the consulate, and the process is the same. The actual application, the I-140 application, is submitted here in the United States. It goes to USCIS. Then after there's a response, assuming that the visa category is current, then what happens is that USCIS then sends it to a different department that's related to the State Department, right? It's called the NVC, the National Visa Center, right?
Hmm.
Where they basically just say, hey, consulate from, Pakistan of the United States or wherever you may be in the world, right? The U.S. consulate in your country. This person has been approved. Start the process to basically have an interview, and essentially in the interview, what they want to find out is that you are truly the person that you claim you to be,
You
right?
are.
And
Yeah.
you're not, having some sort of fraudulent misrepresentation, right? You don't
Hmm.
have any criminal backgrounds, right? They do criminal background checks on you, or you don't have any previous immigration history, negative history, right? So that's basically essentially what they're doing. Checking that you are the person that you claim to be. You don't have any criminal background or negative immigration background, and typically everything goes well. The hardest part is the first part, right? For these
Mm.
visas, once you get that part, approved, everything tends to usually go pretty smooth, and there's no problem.
That's awesome. So perfect. So now what I need to have a further explanation on the option number first, or the route number one, where you says like if somebody is already in the states and he can apply the change of status and all the application together, which is I-140, and also the change of status, and ask for a work authorization and ask for a travel document. Is
Mhm.
this the valid for B1 B2 visa holders also, which is here only on the temporary visits, and
So
F1s, or other non-immigrant visa categories like E1, L1, E2, or student F1s? So all of those are valid.
right, so it's something that's a great question. First off, it's really important to understand something, right? When you're coming into the United States, right,
Mhm.
there's something called intent, right?
Right,
Each visa has either a single intent or a dual intent, right? There's some
right,
visas where you have dual intent, which means that basically even coming in with that visa, right, you can have the intent to try to apply for a residency, right? There's
hmm,
other ones that are single intent visas. And for example, the B1, B2 is a single intent visa. Your intent is to, when you come in, is to leave the United States. But, life happens and immigration understands that. There's something called the 90-day rule, which actually it was done off. It's not any more part of, the process, but
hmm,
typically attorneys, and people who are well versed in this process like to still respect the
hmm,
90-day rule. And what does that mean? That means that the government entity in USCIS understands that things may happen and life changes, right? So once you're in the United States, perhaps you've found out that you might want to live here. It wasn't your
right,
intention to stay here when you came in. You weren't lying to the government when you told them that you wanted to come here, because the B1, B2, people only think it's a tourist visa, but the B1 part of it is
right,
actually business. So you
right,
can come over here and see potential clients. You can't work and get paid here in the United States, but you can see potential clients. You can sign contracts, see distributors, right? Any of the sort, right? So once you come in, your intention was to leave, but some things might change, right? And then if you decide that you think that you have the capability, right, and you've spoken to professionals that agree that you have the capability and the opportunity to potentially be approved for one of these visas, then you can try and do adjustment of status, even if you came in with a single intent visa, right? But it's important, obviously, to understand that you don't want to defraud the government. Once you come in, your intention is to leave, but sometimes people change their minds, their life changes, and after a period of time, like I said, typically 3 months or so, USCIS understands if that's something that you are looking into doing, it's okay for them for the most part. So yes.
wow, okay. So this is good. So if somebody is already here on the non-immigrants with the not an intent of being an immigrant, but he happens to process the documents and change his mind frames and change his profilings, and he applied, he can stay here and get the wait for the decisions to come.
Correct. And we just discussed one visa. There's other visas that have dual intent, right? So that's obviously comes into the equation. But the idea is that, look, you know, uh, immigration understands, right, that, as I said, life changes, right? Maybe once you were here, even though you came in and with a single intent visa, you realize that perhaps you can help this country in many different ways, right? And you have the talents to do so, right? And you're going to be of national interest for this country. So then you started sort of, maybe asking around, maybe you sought, professional help about it, and they told you that you have a good chance, or you have a probability of getting approved for it. So they
Right.
understand it, and so long as your initial intention once you came in wasn't to do this, then they don't have a problem with that typically.
Great, good. And on the other side, when we talk about the consular processings or the embassy processings. So in that option, once your initial I-140 is approved, uh, do you still have a chance, or you are still at the mercy of the interview and the visa officers or the educator to approve or decline your green cards? Or is once you get approved from the USCIS, it is almost like sure that you would get it?
So that's a really good question. So the letter of the law says that until you for consular processing, right? Until you have that interview and you're actually, approved by that officer, that you're not going to be, allowed to come into the United States with that particular visa. So
Okay.
yes, in theory, you have to basically go through that interview and be approved. The reality of the situation is that it's only in these extreme cases where you're not really the person that you claim to be, right? Or they find something sort of shady about you, right? That you
Mhm.
didn't disclose. Or you have some sort of criminal past or some bad immigration history within the United States, right? That you didn't disclose. That's typically when things go a little bit off the road.
Right.
But yes, in theory, you have to be approved. You have to get the stamp
Mhm.
visa on your passport. And once you come into the United States, it's either a stamp or they give you a package, right? And once you
Right.
come
Whatever.
in,
Mhm.
you go, and the processing, the CBP officer opens the package and sees that, hey, you're a resident, and they put a temporary stamp until your actual green card gets into the mail, right? So in theory, you are correct. You have to go through the entire procedure. You have to meet with an officer in the consulate. But like I said, I would say 90, maybe even 90% of the work is done at the I-140 stage. Once that has been approved, you can rest assured that the hardest part has been done.
Perfect. Okay, so that's a good thing. So now I think we have almost covered up all the aspects. At the end of this discussion, how and what you would like to advise for somebody who's who wants to, who gets inspired from this all information which we are giving him, and he wants to start the procedure. So what are the do's and don'ts in a summary, if you can just suggest or advise, or any advices which you wanted to have somebody to go through?
Sure. I mean, look, the dues would be, to contact people that, either know what they're talking about or they have the connections, right? To
Right.
the right people that know what they're talking about, right? So, they might go through you, right? You obviously, you know us, you know our work, and I'm sure
Right.
you know other people as well that do, their work pretty well, professionals, right?
Right.
That know exactly how the process is done. And at the same time, you already have knowledge about how the process works a little bit, right?
Right.
So that way, seek guidance from people, right, that have knowledge as to how the process works and can guide you towards the right sort of entities and companies and people that will be able to process these visas for you, right? That's
Mhm.
the do's. The don't, if it sounds to be too good to be true, right, you probably should do um,
Due
more
diligence.
research, right? And try to sort of vet whoever is trying to sell you something with several and other perspectives to see what sort of opinions you get on that. And to go back on the positive note, the do is just be optimistic. Like I said, nobody just stays and stands where they are uh, unless they want to and doesn't advance in their life, right? So
Right.
you have the opportunity to get better at what you do, right? So
Mhm.
that would be, seek counsel from professionals who have the correct and the right connections, just like you do, right? Seek
Right.
counsel from people who know what they're doing regarding this profession, and try to advance yourself, advance your profile, right? Fortified, make your criteria stronger, right? In the ones that you already meet, or maybe meet other criteria and start working with the right people that know what they're doing to try to work on meeting criterias that will be helpful in order to get a successful application in the future.
Great. So I think that's a very comprehensive brief and introductions. So now we would sum it up. We would thank you for this all great session. And
Oh, thank
lastly, if some of the viewers would like to have initial consultations or evaluations with you, or they want to contact for the to process the program, or to evaluate and choose, or take your seek your professional guidance. So what would be the best way, and are you available to give the initial consultations, or how can they contact you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have our contact information, so
Right.
you can give out our email.
And
And
your
we will
appointment links also we can put in the descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So,
Okay.
we'll have a team, that will sort of vet and see whether or not you're sort of near, what potentially
Right.
could be a good application, and then obviously after that we'll have a conversation. It could be either with me, it could be with Patrick, it could be
Right.
with Aladdin, any of the professionals that know these visas in and out, and can sort of help you determine whether or not you have a shot potentially getting these visas. So, we're more than welcome to, reach out to us, make sure that you contact us, and we'll be more than glad to inform you with all the information that you need in order to make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to move forward with this or not.
Perfect. So I'll put your links and the information on the in the description. And thank you so much for joining the show, for giving this wonderful information. Looking forward to have much more of such sessions with you, so that we can bring more and more information and knowledge to our audience, and help them in taking advancements in their career and the future plans. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
I'm more than honored. I thank you for the time, and I'm more than honored to come back again and try to help your viewers, get here to the United States, because it's not only these two visas, there's a lot more out there
There
that
is a
you could
lot more to come.
work. And
Absolutely.
not
So
only
stay
that,
tuned, guys.
you can build on other visas to get to these visas as well. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank
Raheel,
you
it's
so
been a
much.
pleasure speaking with you.
Have
Take care.
pleasure speaking. Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.